Keira O'Sullivan grew up in a wealthy family and was accustomed to financial prosperity. She had never experienced being without money, and all her desires were fulfilled immediately. Keira knew that money provides complete freedom. Even though she had not earned a penny yet, freedom was her element. She was used to doing things her way. Keira was not stubborn or willful, but as a rich heiress, she valued her own opinion. Therefore, she rejected her father's decision to marry her off to the son of a new acquaintance. "What nonsense!" exclaimed Keira indignantly. "I just graduated from university, and I still want to live for myself." "So you'll keep living like that?" said the father with an exaggeratedly cheerful voice. He already realized that dealing with his daughter would not be easy. However, he had always known this, and now he feverishly looked for weighty arguments. "I am not going to marry you off to just anyone, but to a very wealthy person. The groom's name is Brandon Scionti." But the father's argument clearly did not affect the girl. "Well, what a stroke of luck," Keira smirked, but in reality she wasn't laughing. Honestly, it was like the Middle Ages. Marriages for merging and strengthening joint businesses always amused Keira. Such marriages were not uncommon in their circle, and now it seemed like Keira was about to join the ranks of those lucky ones for whom parents had found a prince. However, she did not want any wedding, especially with a groom that she found unimpressive and boring. But Gregory O'Sullivan had weighty reasons to marry off his daughter, at least he thought so. Not long ago, the businessman was diagnosed with a serious illness, and doctors would not give any predictions. Like many parents of late children, he was afraid that Keira would be left alone. His beloved wife had been dead for 5 years. Taking care of his only daughter was a sacred duty, and Gregory O'Sullivan hurried as soon as possible to arrange her personal life. As old as time, but to Keira it seemed like real madness. Let others get married, not to disrupt the interests of wealthy parents, but I don't care, she thought. I will definitely come up with something, just not to become the wife of this Brandon. And she did come up with something. If I'm going to protest, I have to do it beautifully and creatively, she decided with enthusiasm, and came up with a pretty cool joke. Another girl would be hiding under the veil instead of her. In this original way, she planned to let her father know that she was against his interference in her life. The main thing is to find a suitable candidate and not argue with her father. Let him think that I agreed to this ridiculous marriage. Well, for now, let's stall for time, Keira thought to herself. I invited the Sciontis for lunch today, the father announced triumphantly over breakfast. It's time to finally set a date for the wedding. Keira forced a sour smile and muttered, Yeah, you're right. Her father was so genuinely pleased that Keira almost felt sorry for him, but only for a moment. She wouldn't let even her beloved father turn her into a puppet. Now I'll transfer the money to you, and you should buy yourself a new dress, the father continued. And of course a beauty salon and other things. You know what to do. My daughter must be at her best. I'm certainly not going to do anything for that slippery Brandon, Keira thought gloomily. Suddenly the phone beeped, notifying the owner that the money had arrived. Keira looked at it and mentally whispered, Looks like Dad really wants to make an impression on these Sciontis. Well, I'm warned, so I'm armed. I've already finished my breakfast, Keira said with a smile, so I'm going shopping. Her father smiled and said joyfully, That's my girl. But Keira had no intention of going to any beauty salon. A new dress would be nice for lifting my spirits, she thought, but I'll spend my time much more wisely than father thinks. After a productive visit to the boutique, Keira went searching for a suitable bride for wealthy Brandon Scionti. She visited the nearest park, but couples, young mothers and well-off-looking girls were walking there, as well as older women who were unlikely to be interested in her offer. Suddenly, Keira saw a poor but rather pretty brunette about her age. Keira was about to approach her when a similarly dressed guy with a rose approached the girl and kissed her hand. This is real life, Keira thought enviously. Sincere love, sincere feelings are no marriages for business interests. Yes, they're poor, but they still have everything ahead of them. Lost in philosophical thoughts, Keira walked towards the park exit. She had 2 hours until dinner, and she needed to freshen up. She sat in her favourite Audi, sighed heavily, and drove home. As expected, lunch was boring. Both fathers praised their offspring, and if Keira didn't know where to hide from shame, her potential groom wanted to show her that the bride would be behind him like a stone wall. But Keira had little faith in that. "Keira, go show Brandon the winter garden," offered the father. "Dad, let's do it another time. I'm tired today," the daughter replied, trying to hide her annoyance. The thought of being alone with Brandon disgusted Keira. "Oh, that's true. You still have your whole life ahead of you," said Gregory O'Sullivan, and his daughter breathed a sigh of relief. Brandon's father only nodded condescendingly. Apparently, the relationship between his son and future daughter-in-law worried him the least in the world. Keira, for her part, thought that she should hurry up with finding a replacement bride because the wedding would be in 2 weeks. In the evening, Keira decided to go on her peculiar hunt again. She rode to a small summer cafe and ordered a salad, sitting down at a table. And suddenly, she saw the one she needed. It was a strange woman with long dark hair, the same height and build as her. The stranger's faded synthetic dress clearly had seen better days, and her worn shoes spoke louder than words. Besides, she was limping. The girl was clearing the table, and Keira concluded that she was a dishwasher or something like that, certainly not a waitress. The girl taking the order was dressed in a cute uniform and looked impeccable. On one of the tables there was an untouched pie, which the presumed candidate in bride put in a paper bag, without a hint of embarrassment. Continuing to watch the girl, Keira saw her put the bag in an old, well-worn purse. There was no doubt that this young woman was in dire need of money. "Miss, we're closing," the poor girl told Keira quietly and politely. "Yes, of course, but I need to talk to you," Keira replied. "With me?" The stranger was surprised. "Yes, with you," Keira confirmed. "Don't be afraid, I won't do anything bad to you." Seeing that the girl was hesitating, Keira laughed. "Oh, don't be afraid of me. What's your name?" "Linda." The cafe worker smiled hesitantly. "That's better. A smile suits you. My name is Keira. Let me give you a ride home, and we'll talk on the way. Where do you live?" "Oh, no, it's not necessary." Linda shook her head. "It's far, on the outskirts of the city. I'm sure you've never been to such places." "Then, all the more reason to fill this gap," Keira exclaimed cheerfully. Linda Morris's life was difficult to compare to a fairy tale, perhaps only to a horror story. She had limped since birth, and her peers had made fun of her. Doctors said it was the result of a difficult birth. Linda's mother had long since died, and her stepfather drank incessantly. Linda had distant relatives, but they had no interest in her. After finishing school, Linda wanted to enroll in some kind of vocational school, but her stepfather said curtly, "Stop messing around, you need to earn money," and she went to work. Yesterday, a schoolgirl got a job at a cafe. The pay for auxiliary workers was meagre, but it was enough for poor food and drink for her stepfather. 4 years passed, and Linda still performed the dirtiest work at the cafe. Seeing a well-dressed strange girl in a bright red cabriolet, the girl just sighed heavily. She understood that she would never have such a car. She wished she could at least save up for decent jeans and a dress. Therefore, when Keira said she wanted to discuss something, Linda was very surprised. They were people from different worlds. What could they talk about? Yet Linda found herself in the beautiful and cosy car of the wealthy young beauty. "Linda, "Wouldn't you like to change your life for the better?" asked the car owner, getting straight to the point. "To change my life?" Linda asked thoughtfully, wondering what this rich girl wanted from her. "It's obvious that I don't have a life that I don't want to change. But how can I do that?" "Well, there are plenty of opportunities in our time," murmured Keira. "No, not for everyone," sighed Linda. "You're probably studying at a prestigious university or have already graduated, and I have no education. You won't believe it, but I've had to beg for alms, and my stepfather keeps throwing me out of the house more and more frequently." "Why?" "He doesn't care why," Linda replied, and catching herself added, "Sorry, of course, you're not to blame for my problems." "But maybe I can help you solve them," Keira said intriguingly. Linda looked at Keira skeptically, but she continued, "I want to offer you the part in a play. Of course, the payment will be decent." "Are you looking for an actress?" asked Linda, the first thing that came to mind, and hastily shook her head. "I'm afraid I won't be able to do it." "I assure you, you can do it," Keira said encouragingly. "I don't need a professional actress. It's just a small prank that anyone can handle. You won't have to do anything. It's completely safe and nothing illegal." Linda hesitated. She wasn't used to trusting so-called Good Samaritans. There's clearly some catch here, she thought. "But why me?" Linda asked. "It's simple," Keira replied with relief, noting that her proposal had piqued her new acquaintance's interest. "We have the same build and hair." Linda looked at the rich girl in amazement and fear, and she burst out laughing. "No, I'm not going to set you up. Admit it. You thought about it, didn't you?" Linda nodded shyly. "As I said that, there is nothing illegal." Keira chuckled and began telling her interlocutor what she would have to do. "I just want to teach my father and the groom a lesson," she concluded, "and you won't risk anything. All you have to do is stand with your face covered by a veil, and when the deception is revealed, you'll blame me and leave. Come on, agree, there's no risk," Keira assured her. Linda wasn't sure, but Keira's proposal left her completely confused. Linda understood that the wealthy had their quirks, and they also cried, and probably for the same reasons as the poor, but she didn't suspect that the rich could go so far in their whims. To be honest, this plan smelled bad. What if Linda starts referring to Keira, and who guarantees that someone will believe her? They might even declare her an imposter and send her to a prison. But on the other hand, Linda really wanted to participate in the wedding, especially such a wealthy one, try on a luxurious wedding dress, and feel loved and desired even for a moment. For a girl in her circle, it was an unattainable dream. It's unlikely to be worse than it already is, because it can't get any worse, Linda thought, and agreed to the adventure. "That's great!" exclaimed Keira joyfully. "Tomorrow we'll go get the wedding dress and other accessories." The next day, Keira picked up Linda and brought her straight to a boutique where she was a regular customer. Linda hesitated, but Keira decisively stated, "A girl in shabby clothes at an elite bridal salon? We don't need to attract any unnecessary attention." In the end, Linda became the owner of a nice white t-shirt and beautiful fuchsia pants. "All right, now shoes," muttered Keira, critically examining the brightly coloured sandals with a high chunky heel. "I don't need shoes," Linda hurriedly replied. "Are you going to the bridal salon in those clogs?" "But Linda didn't finish her sentence because Keira herself remembered that her stand-in had a limp. "Oh, sorry, but we can find something more comfortable for you, like sneakers." Of course, Keira could have bought the ordinary wedding dress and shoes without taking Linda with her. Even the most modest bridal gown would have been the epitome of luxury for Linda, but Keira wanted the girl from the poor neighbourhood to experience wearing cool clothes and not feel left out. Remembering where Linda lives, Keira shuddered. She couldn't believe that people could live like that, especially in the part where Linda lived. Old houses that seemed like they would collapse any minute. The aromas of overflowing garbage cans that made Keira hastily close the car windows. And, to top it off, the piercing question from Linda's stepfather, "Where have you been?" After lingering for a moment near the dilapidated shack that couldn't be called a home, Keira saw Linda hand over money to her stepfather. He grabbed the bills and headed to the small, obvious only shop in the entire area. All of this was, of course, terrible, but Keira once again confirmed that this girl was exactly what she needed. The only weak point was her limp, but a long full dress will cover it up. "Do you like anything?" Keira asked her double with a smile while they were looking at gorgeous wedding dresses. "I like everything," Linda replied, looking thoughtfully at wedding dresses, shoes, hats, brides' bouquets, and other wedding attributes. "Well then, choose something," said Keira. "Maybe this?" Linda asked, hesitantly, pointing to a relatively simple, inexpensive dress. "This?" Keira wrinkled her pretty nose. "It's only suitable for a run-down eatery in your area." "You know, Keira," Linda blurted out, "not everyone is lucky enough to be born into a wealthy family. Your mum and dad bring you everything. And me?" "Oh, she's got a temper," thought the rich girl respectfully, and said softly, "Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that the dress should emphasize my father's status. Personally, I don't care what I wear, but our circle has its own rules of the game, and I didn't create them. Do you understand?" Linda nodded, and Keira showed her a few options for dresses, ultimately settling on a spectacular one. "It's great. Now, the most important thing is the headgear. We need a hat with a thick veil," Keira explained to the shop assistant. 20 minutes later, the girls left the store with their purchases. "Are you going to work now?" Keira asked as they loaded the bags into the trunk. "Yes," Linda nodded. "Do you need a ride?" "It's not far," Linda shrugged. "Yeah, you obviously won't die of modesty," Keira remarked. "Get in already." They drove in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "Why are you so sad?" Keira asked Linda in the end. "I am a little afraid," sighed the girl. "I don't like that mood," Linda said. "Don't think about anything. You do what you have to do, then you get the money, and the rest is my concern." Linda sighed again. She was sure it was useless to explain to the spoiled rich girl how ugly it was to cheat on her own family and involve strangers in it. The wedding day was approaching, and Linda was getting more scared every day. The girl thought more and more often about giving up on the role of the bride. After all, it was Keira's problem, not hers. More and more often, Linda caught herself thinking that she envied the rich because they have everything. Maybe except freedom. The acquaintance with Keira became a stimulus for the poor girl to achieve prosperity. Next year, she would try to enter at least a college. The main thing, to become a person and not a faceless auxiliary worker in the cafe. And it was time to stop sponsoring her alcoholic stepfather. Eventually, Linda firmly decided that tomorrow she would tell Keira that she would not participate in this stupid show. "Hi," Keira greeted her ward cheerfully the next day. "How's the mood?" "Normal," replied Linda, hiding her eyes. "Glad to hear. I want to invite you to a bachelorette party. I promise it'll be wonderful." "Well, there will probably be girls from your circle there," Linda said, confused. "But you have something to do with the party too, don't you?" "Keira," Linda said slowly, "I have something to tell you. You will say the day after tomorrow at the bachelorette party." Keira cooed And now the girls and I are going to the spa. Bye." Remembering that the bachelorette party was the day after tomorrow made Linda feel cold, because the next day was the wedding day, and she had stupidly not said what she wanted to say. However, there was still time. The whole next day, Linda intended to call her so-called employer, but she couldn't make up her mind. Maybe I just won't go to the bachelorette party, and Keira will understand everything. Yes, that's what I'll do, the girl decided, but the next day she woke up to a phone call. She had promised herself so many times to turn off her phone on her days off, but for some reason she stubbornly didn't. Looking at the display, the girl almost groaned, but she didn't drop the call. It was Keira. "Hi, gorgeous. I'll pick you up at 3 o'clock. We'll go to the boutique." "Why?" Linda yawned again, still not fully awake. "Oh, silly. Don't tell me you're going to the bachelorette party in your unforgettable clothes." "I'm not going." "That's what I thought. Of course you're not. So, meet me at 3 sharp." "Okay," said Linda, cursing herself for her inability to say no. "I need $20, came her stepfather's ingratiating voice. He had been talking to his stepdaughter that way lately, and Linda knew exactly where the wind was coming from. "I don't have 20, she lied. "I paid the utilities yesterday." "Why don't you borrow some money from your new girlfriend?" her stepfather asked hopefully. "No," Linda retorted. Her stepfather did not insist and left the house. He went to look for someone to borrow from. "And later I will have to pay for him," Linda sighed. Sometimes she wondered why she never kicked out her stepfather. In fact, he was a stranger, so she could ask him to vacate the living space in good conscience, especially since he often kicked Linda out of her own house. Usually he did it in a drunken state because the stepdaughter did not give him money for drinks. So why didn't Linda kick him out? Partly in memory of when he was a different man, but objectively it was because of Linda's inability to say no. So they coexisted side by side, 2 people thrown overboard. Keira arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, as promised. Suddenly, Linda realized that she wanted to go to the bachelorette party. After all, why should she sit at home alone with her stepfather, who would soon get drunk and might kick her out of the house? The girls stopped by a boutique, and Keira bought Linda some dark blue jeans and a white shirt. That was the dress code for the bachelorette party. They drove to a private country club. Neither suspected that this bachelorette party would fundamentally change everything. Keira's friends welcomed Linda, thus dispelling stereotypes of arrogant rich girls, although it was not known how they would have accepted Linda in second-hand clothes. For Keira's friends, Linda was her distant relative, and they were not privy to the rest of the details. Linda was unexpectedly pleased that she and Keira shared a secret. Linda suddenly caught herself thinking that she was beginning to grow attached to Keira, which seemed to be why she had never decided to give up her role in this crazy adventure. "Lucky you, Keira," said Deborah, a spectacular tanned blonde. "It must be a beautiful wedding." "I want one too. I can imagine me in a white dress, my dad walking down the aisle, and my mum—" "Oh, I'm sorry." "That's all right," muttered the culprit of the celebration quietly. "I hope my mum would be happy for me." The girls nodded in unison. "Mum is always there for us wherever she is." "I hope so," Keira sighed. "So we must have the same pain," Linda thought. "But there's nothing strange about it. Rich people's wives die too." The girls went off to dance, and Keira remained seated at the table with her head resting on the intertwined fingers. Responding to Linda's impulse, she walked over to her and put a hand on her shoulder. "My mum died too," she said. "I was only 10 at the time, but for me, it was like a very recent thing." "Really?" asked Keira with a sad smile. "So you and I are sisters in misfortune?" "I guess so." Linda smiled involuntarily, remembering her recent thought. And Keira suddenly took her hand and whispered, "You know, I really like you." "And I like you," Linda replied sincerely. "Great. We'll give them all a show tomorrow." Linda suddenly felt light and cheerful because she had found such a great friend. The bachelorette party was fun, and Linda went to spend the night at the O'Sullivans' mansion. "Good morning, bride," Gregory said with a broad smile. "How was the party?" "Hi, Dad. Everything was super," replied Keira, diligently portraying a happy bride. "The years go by so quickly," exclaimed the father. "It's a pity your mum won't be rejoicing with us." "I'm not sure Mum would be happy about this marriage," thought Keira, and said aloud, "All right, Dad, I'm going to the bathroom. The makeup artist will be here soon, and I'm not ready yet." "I see," said the father with a smile. When the false Keira limped out of the limousine, the guests began to whisper incomprehensively. "Why is Keira limping?" "Maybe she got her calluses," one of Keira's friends suggested. "Poor girl," said the advanced-aged socialite, wife of one of Mr. O'Sullivan's business partners. "Maybe she twisted her foot in those high stilettos." "Why is her face all covered? That's not the trend right now," remarked the elegant middle-aged woman. "Did O'Sullivan skimp on a more up-to-date version? Or maybe the girl just had too funny bachelorette party," giggled one of the guests. "The play is starting," thought Keira excitedly, standing a little farther away. She was wearing an ash-coloured wig and massive glasses. Anyone who knew O'Sullivan's only daughter would hardly recognise Keira in this stern lady. When the guests moved to the place of marriage, she resolutely wedged into the crowd, while the officiator made her heartfelt speech. Linda's excitement grew. "What do I do?" she thought feverishly. "Should I take off my shoes and run away like Cinderella?" She could feel that in seconds more she would become hysterical. Linda cost a great deal of labour to keep herself in control. Overwhelmed, the girl not even immediately realised that she was asked if she would become Brandon's wife. It was the very moment when Linda had to take off her veil. But she did not have time to do it because the groom suspected something himself. Brandon suddenly lifted the veil and shouted, "She's not Keira!" Among the guests there was a general cry of amazement. The journalists sensed something much more interesting than another wedding of rich kids, became visibly animated, and frantically clicked shutters. Brandon kept yelling, "It's not Keira! I was deceived!" The groom's father approached Gregory O'Sullivan and, full of righteous anger, said, "I did not expect this from you. Don't dream about a favourable deal anymore. Your family are swindlers." A young journalist approached Mr. Skiontis, smiling, but he only threateningly said, "No comment." She made a step towards Mr. O'Sullivan, but he definitely turned away. Linda looked around, searching for Keira, but there was no sign of her. Frankly speaking, the fake bride expected less resonance. But it was only the first act of the grandiose scandal. One of the guests, Mr. Hagan, took a closer look at Linda and suddenly gasped, "It can't be." The journalists, who were about to go away, slowed down. They could not believe such luck. Mr. Hagan was the head of one of the major construction companies in the country. He seemed to have completely forgotten that at least 100 eyes were looking at him. "Girl, what is your name?" he addressed the fake bride. "Linda?" she asked confusedly. "Linda, you are incredibly like my first love," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Is your mum's name Holly, by any chance?" "Yeah, Her name is Holly. Linda widened her eyes. Oh, please, let's go to some quiet, peaceful place where we could talk, the businessman suggested, and led the bewildered Linda to the exit. People realized there would be no more sensations for today, began to disperse. The journalists were delighted. They definitely worked for glory today. Linda and Mr. Hagan approached a luxurious dark cherry Porsche, and the gallant man opened the door for the girls, smiling and saying, "Get in. You know, you are one of the most beautiful brides I have ever seen." "Thank you," Linda nodded, wondering what he wanted from her. "My name is Leonard Hagan," the businessman introduced himself reservedly, and Linda turned pale. She remembered how her mother talked to a friend about Leonard. "I see. Linda, my name means something to you," Mr. Hagan said, noticing the expression on her face. "Yes, just the name," the girl whispered. "And how old are you?" "I'm 21. I was born on October 9th. 21 years old," Mr. Hagan said thoughtfully. "Linda, has your mother remarried?" "My mother died more than 10 years ago," Linda said, her voice trembling. "Yes, she was married, but her husband is not my biological father. My mother had a heart attack. The ambulance didn't make it in time." "Linda," the businessman said after a short pause, "this may seem crazy to you, but I think you are my daughter. Let's not talk about it in vain. Let's do a DNA test. Can we meet on Monday?" Mr. Hagan asked. "I thought that only happened on soap operas. However, I can't be on Monday. I work." "Do you work?" Mr. Hagan asked in surprise. "Where, if not a secret?" "In a cafe, as an assistant worker," the girl answered, a little embarrassed. "I have no connection to your circle." "That's all right. I wasn't always rich either. And I took any job. Unloading wagons, working as a courier, doing odd jobs. It's great that you earn a living on your own. But how did you end up at this wedding?" After listening to Linda's story, the man laughed out loud. "Well, girls, you've gone crazy. I recognize Keira. If she decides something, she'll do it no matter what. Okay, it's your business. What about Thursday instead of Monday?" Linda nodded. "I have a day off on Thursday." And Mr. Hagan smiled in agreement. Meanwhile, Keira's father was fuming. "What an ungrateful girl she is. Keira has everything necessary for a normal life. She never knew denial in anything, and this is how she thanked me." Suddenly the doorbell rang. Gregory looked at the video intercom and smiled. "Keira, I will show you your father's real anger now." "Hi, dear," replied the father, his tone not boding well. "I'm excited to personally inform you that for your treacherous act, I'm revoking all cards and any help from me," Gregory said stiffly. "Seems fair to me." Damn, he really isn't kidding, Keira thought in horror. The girl became visibly dejected. It was not the effect she had hoped for. Keira, of course, planned to get a job in her speciality. She graduated from the Faculty of Romano-Germanic Philosophy, so finding a job wasn't a problem. Many reputable companies needed good translators, and Keira had all the right skills. But what would she do until her first paycheck? Did her father intend to ask her to leave home? "No, you can stay here," he answered when Keira asked him about it. "But of course you can rent another place for yourself, or you can buy one. You don't even realize how you've set me up." "So tell me." "What's the point? You've already done your job." "Suit yourself." Keira shrugged and went to her room. A few weeks passed after the wedding. Linda and Mr. Hagan took a DNA test, and the result was positive. Linda was stunned. Just a few weeks ago, She was an unremarkable auxiliary worker in a cafe, living in the worst corner of the city, and now a respectable businessman, who turned out to be her father, was making grand plans for her. "You're not going back to your hole anymore," he said, "and you don't need to work anymore. Next year you'll go to college. Where would you like to go?" "I've always loved math," Linda replied. "Okay," Mr. Hagen said cheerfully. "You can go to the economics department, and you then work for my company. But that's all later, because now we're going shopping, and I'm going to buy you many beautiful things. Then we'll go look at an apartment." Linda's head was spinning. "I've been meaning to ask for a long time, why didn't you and my mum get married?" "We broke up stupidly." The story is not original. Not only did Holly like me, but her best friend Zoe did too. She set the whole thing up. At one of the student parties, she asked one of the handsome guys from the university to make out with Holly and made sure that I walked in at the right moment. Not only did she make sure that I saw the alleged love scene, but she also convinced me that Holly had been dating this guy for a long time. When Holly told me that she was pregnant, I half thought she was lying to get me back. Repented Mr. Hagen. I would like to change everything now, but alas, that's impossible. But now you're here, as if fate itself gave me a chance to redeem myself in front of Holly. By the way, you have a step-brother and a step-sister. I'll introduce you to them for sure. But first, of course, I will prepare the family. My wife is a kind woman. You'll see for yourself." After an excellent shopping spree, dinner at a restaurant, and a tour of the apartment, Mr. Hagen took his newfound daughter to the apartment he had rented for her while settling the formalities associated with the purchase of her own apartment. The girl looked around and thought for the first time in her life she was in normal living conditions. "I wonder how Keira is doing. By the way, I should call her to thank her," Linda thought, and pulled the brand new cell phone her father had bought for her out of her purse. However, Keira's voice was sad when she answered the phone. "I wanted to thank you," Linda said. "Thank you? For what?" "It's a long story," Linda replied hesitantly, realizing that Keira didn't know anything. "It's okay, I have plenty of time." Keira grinned unhappily. "Well then, I'm waiting for you. Write down the address. I live somewhere else now." Keira was pleased to hear from Linda. It was like a breath of fresh air, which was so necessary for people after something unpleasant had happened. Linda's invitation had come at the right time, because sitting around pining for the bank cards she had taken away was no fun. When Keira heard that Linda no longer lived in that terrible house, she was surprised. Keira had heard that one of her father's business partners said that her understudy looked like his first love, or something like that. But on that lyrical note, she hurried out of the wedding. She also heard talk of Mr. Hagen's new daughter, because the business crowd can be compared to a village. Rumours spread with the speed of a forest fire. And now Keira had the opportunity to learn everything firsthand. She gladly accepted the invitation, and it wasn't just curiosity. Keira really wanted to see Linda. "Wow!" Keira exclaimed as she stepped into the former beggar's new abode. "It's stunning! I can't say anything else. So Mr. Hagen really turned out to be your father?" "Yes," Linda smiled. "What about you? How are you doing?" "My dad confiscated all my cards," replied Keira, not sounding cheerful. "Good thing that he left me my car at least. It's time to become a cab driver." Linda felt embarrassed. Sharing her joy when someone else's business left a lot to be desired seemed sacrilegious to her. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know it would turn out this way, especially since you asked me to." "Linda, what are you talking about?" "Well, I'm doing fine now, and you got it so bad." muttered Linda. When it finally dawned on Keira what her friend meant, she laughed out loud. That's what you mean, I assure you. I don't hold a grudge against you. You found your father. That's wonderful. So what's your fault? Keira was genuinely happy for Linda. Besides, she suddenly enjoyed feeling like a good fairy for this nice girl. Keira knew that Mr. Hagen is obscenely richer than her father. His money will open before his daughter knew previously unknown opportunities, such as surgery to correct lameness. The girls had a nice sit-down and Keira went home late at night. The next day she noticed that her father looked terrible. He even seemed to have lost weight and become gaunt. "Dad, are you sick?" the girl asked fearfully. "I feel bad," nodded the father, greedily gulping air with his mouth. "I'm calling the ambulance," Keira shouted, and, as if in a fog, picked up the phone. What followed was like a bad dream. Her father had fallen into a coma. When Keira asked the doctors how long it would last, they gave no answer. "It can either last a few days or a few years," the doctor said. When Keira called her family doctor, she was shocked. "Your father contacted me a couple of months ago, and the findings were discouraging," said the doctor. "I didn't know anything about that," a shocked Keira slowly muttered. "Apparently he didn't want to upset you, or hoped it would go away." "I wish I had married as my father wanted me to," Keira thought in despair. The girl was scared and anxious in her house alone, so she went to Linda to spend the night at her place. The next morning, while they were having breakfast, the doorbell rang. "Are you expecting someone?" inquired Keira. "No," shrugged Linda, "unless it's my dad. But he's at work at this time." Saying this, she went to open the door. On the threshold, she saw Brandon Sciotis with a bouquet of dark maroon roses. "May I come in?" he asked with a smile. "Come in," Linda replied after a little thought. Seeing the failed spouse, Keira wrinkled her nose and hurried back to her home. Meanwhile, Brandon handed Linda the roses and said, "I liked you so much that I asked myself, why don't we get to know each other better?" "Really?" the girl laughed, remembering the look on his face when he tore off her veil. "But you had a face like I was an alien." "Well, I was confused. Think for yourself how you would feel in my place," Brandon replied. "I guess so," agreed Linda. "How about some tea?" "With pleasure," smiled the unexpected guest. After tea, Brandon invited Linda for a walk, and in the evening they went to the movies. So began their relationship. One day, Linda and Keira met in a coffee shop. "I have some stunning news," Linda said cryptically. "Keira, I'm so happy. I realize you're going through a rough time right now, but I just don't have anyone to share my news with. Brandon and I are getting married, and this time it's going to be for real. It's great, isn't it?" "Linda," replied Keira with a sigh, "I'd like to be happy for you, but it's just not working out. It's all kind of weird." "Do you think it's impossible for him to love me?" burst out Linda. "Of course not," exclaimed Keira. "But think about it. He shows up out of the blue, and a week later he's proposing. Don't you find that suspicious yourself? Something's not right. I wonder if he would have come to you if you hadn't been Mr. Hagen's daughter." Keira snorted. "So I can only be loved for my money?" Linda's voice rang with indignation. "Oh, you're deliberately discouraging me out of jealousy." "Linda, come to your senses. If I needed Brandon, then why did I need that masquerade at the wedding?" "Well, okay, you love him, and very possibly he loves you. But the fact that he proposed to you a month after meeting you is suspicious. And this is, although not long ago, he was going to marry me the same way." However, no reasonable arguments worked on Linda. "I thought you were my friend," she said. "I am, but Linda, please understand." "Go away." "Okay, whatever you say," said Keira as she stood up from the table. "But you'll realize in the end that I was right." She got into the car and called the hospital. Her dad was still in a coma. Keira sighed heavily. It seemed like her life had hit a rough patch. Her father in a coma, and now the fight with Linda. But Keira sincerely wished her happiness, and then she came up with a great idea. After studying many reviews about honest detectives in the city, Keira preferred Carl Davis. After meeting with the detective, she was convinced that she made the right choice. He had not only an athletic physique, but was also an intelligent, tenacious look. Carl professionally asked questions, and at the end of the conversation he said, "Well, we have a good chance of finding out what is associated with such a rush. There may indeed be some mystery here." Carl called 5 days later. "You were right in your suspicions. The thing is, they're almost bankrupt. David Skiontis and his son Brandon invested in several startups, hoping to make a quick return with interest, but they miscalculated. Besides, my friend from the financial fraud department said they were preparing materials on illegal business activity and tax evasion. They are facing huge fines and most likely bankruptcy." After saying goodbye to the detective, Keira called Linda. Frankly speaking, Linda herself doubted the sincerity of her fiancé's feelings. After the beginning of the relationship, Brandon became enthusiastic and began to press on, and this pressure had nothing to do with the impatience inherent in a young man in love. Metal notes began to appear in the groom's voice, and Linda had a sneaking suspicion that Keira was right. She wanted to call her friend and apologize, but never decided to. So when she saw Keira calling, the girl rejoiced. "Linda, hi," said Keira in a high-pitched voice. "Just for God's sake, don't hang up. I have some important information for you." "Hi, Keira. I'm not going to hang up. And I also missed you very much." "What's the information?" Linda asked, and Keira told her everything. That evening, Keira got a call from the hospital. "Ms. O'Sullivan, we have good news for you. Your father is out of the coma, and we have a good prognosis for his condition." The next day, she visited him and was pleased to note that he looked much better. When her daughter told him what the detective had been able to find out, he was very surprised. "You're a clever girl," the father said with a smile, "and I was so worried about leaving you without a man's support that I couldn't see any farther than my nose. My little girl, forgive me for my foolishness." A month passed. Linda broke up with Brandon and never saw him again. Mr. O'Sullivan had recovered by that time, and soon he was discharged from the hospital. Keira, with Linda and Carl, came to meet him from the hospital. "Daddy, let me introduce my fiancé, Carl Davis," Keira said with a smile. "Just as you dreamed, a worthy man by your daughter's side." Gregory O'Sullivan watched the beautiful couple and was finally glad that all the bad things were left behind.